The Bible's immortal message of peace has echoed down through the generations. From this great book comes much that we hold noble, much to which we aspire, the very foundations of Western morality.
They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war evermore. Isaiah 2:4.
And yet, with all of its spirituality and all of its great humane teachings, how can the Bible also contain such messages of violence and anger? Just what is the Bible trying to tell us? Peace, love, and brotherhood? Or unforgiving, harsh justice? But why is the good book burdened with so much punishment and wrath? Why does it seem that so many ungodly acts are committed in the name of God? These are but a few of the mysteries of the Bible. Today, the earth is quiet. But in 701 before the Common Era, the sky was dark with arrows. Siege machines lumbered forward like monsters on the march, and the ground ran red with blood, as one of the most brutal mysteries of the Bible was enacted upon this plain. Here at the ancient city of Lachish, we are told God sent Assyria, one of the cruelest of nations, to wreak vengeance upon the Israelites.
Lord of hosts is mustering a host of war, men from a far country, from beyond the horizon. It is the Lord with the weapons of his wrath, coming to lay the whole land to waste. Isaiah 13:5.
But why would a God who professes to love his people, a God who calls himself a Lord of salvation, a Lord of mercy, why would such a God cause such a terrible thing to happen? Any quest for insight into violence in the Bible might begin in the earliest days of the Old Testament, when a human relationship with God was being born. The year is approximately 2000 before the Common Era. It was a time of great warring empires. Brutal nations are hungry for power, land, and tribute. Assyria, with its magnificent art and technology, and an army unrivaled in all history for cruelty. Egypt, with its pharaohs, half human and half god. Bitter power struggles and vast monuments built with the forced labor of slaves. Babylonia, where ancient astrologers plumbed the mysteries of the heavens, where, legend says, the Tower of Babel rose toward the skies. All these civilizations worship many gods, but the most revered, the most hallowed among all their deities are the gods who lead them into war. Religion and war are inextricably linked. In the ruins of Karnak, we find pictures of the Egyptian pharaoh, who was considered a god-man, with club in hand, holding the hair of a foreign enemy about to destroy him. The Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal, rides his chariot into battle, bow drawn. Hovering above his head is his god, Ashur, with his bow also drawn, assisting the king. For the Babylonians, the most powerful and fearsome of their gods was Marduk. But why do these great empires of the ancient Middle East worship above all others the gods who fought their wars?
The rulers are able to marshal the people, to make great sacrifices, including their own lives, and to make it the will of God or the gods that you fight with your ruler, and not just that I want you to. So I think that it serves a pretty profound and important ideological purpose, particularly for the rulers, to get the people to go along with this heavy sacrifice that is involved in warfare.
Something here had to do, I think, with psychological warfare, to try to strike terror into the enemy armies by the imposing insignia and iconography of the national deity. My God is bigger than your God.
It is in this dark and turbulent world that a different kind of God first reveals himself to Abraham. A God of justice. A God with no mighty army, no temples to his name, no fearsome reputation. In fact, this God doesn't look like anything at all. This God is an essence. This God is a presence. This God is invisible to the eye.
God embodies everything, and therefore all things human are just small slivers of the vastness that God has, according to the Bible.
It can be said that in Abraham's relationship to God is the very beginning of monotheism, the worship of one divine power. One God who is master of all heaven and earth. One God to whom all people must answer. One guiding hand in the universe.
Pagan gods cared about how you treated them, but not about how you treated each other. If I insult you, that's a great reflection on the God of Israel, because you are a creation of the God of Israel. You are in God's image, and therefore in insulting you, I'm insulting God.
It is here on Mount Moriah, many centuries later to be the site of Judaism's Holy Temple and Islam's Dome of the Rock, that God tests Abraham by requesting the sacrifice of his son, Isaac. That God promises the patriarch and his monotheistic tribe a land of milk and honey.
Go from your country to a land I will show you. I shall make of you a great nation. I shall bless you and make your name great. Genesis 12:1.
But in return for the Lord's protection and guidance, the Hebrews would have to keep his covenant. A covenant which includes an undying allegiance to a God who insists that he is the one God and that his people shall have no other gods before him. One God for whom all men are brothers. But if humans are kin, why then will God so soon appear to take sides? And why will God resort to so much violence in the process?
The major difference between the God of Israel's relationship to violence and that of pagan gods is that the God of Israel must always place violence into a moral context. Now, we may have trouble sometimes with that moral context, but it can't be you have to conquer just because it's fun to conquer. There must always be some greater end or moral significance to conquest.
Is this truly a God of peace? Or still another ancient God of war? Will God intervene directly in the fight against the oppression of his people? Or will it be left to human hands? The year is 1300 before the Common Era. The place is Egypt. Lashed by the whip, the Israelites find themselves enslaved, laboring to build vast monuments to the gods of Egypt and to Pharaoh himself, the man-god of the kingdom of the sun. The God of the Hebrews is angered. Pharaoh will be forced to let the people go. And God will accomplish this purpose not with persuasion, but with violence.
I shall go out among the Egyptians. All the firstborn in Egypt shall die. From all of Egypt will go up a great cry, the like of which has never been heard before, nor ever will be again. Exodus 11:4.
God unleashes a succession of plagues, but it is only when God unleashes the plague of the death of the firstborn that Pharaoh relents.
He tried to allow Pharaoh a way out. At each plague, had Pharaoh said, okay, I'll let you go, that would have been it. In the end, God slays the firstborn because no other action, it seems, is going to persuade Pharaoh to let the people go.
But is all the violence necessary? Is it the only way God could have brought about the Hebrew slaves' liberation?
This is a story that builds from smaller plagues to larger plagues. It's a story in which God has total control. He is hardening Pharaoh's heart on purpose in order to show his glory and his greatness. This is a God who brags, and we see such deities throughout the ancient Near East.
But here it could be said God's violence has a purpose and a message for a proud and stubborn ruler.
The main message of the Exodus is liberation from enslavement. And that war, even violence, for the support of those who are being oppressed is okay.
Pharaoh wails in pain and shouts at the Israelites to leave. But then, as the Exodus begins, Pharaoh's heart hardens and he changes his mind. He sends fierce charioteers to stop the fleeing Hebrews. And then, more of God's violence with the parting of the Red Sea.
At that point, Moses turns to the people and says, "Stand and watch. God will fight for you." So that's one of the primary statements of the nature of this kind of God of war. This kind of God of war fights not with us, but for us. And that's a considerably different and unique theology of warfare that comes across in the Bible.
And fight God does. He sweeps the waters open for the Israelites, and as the Egyptians race after them, the waters close. Safe on the other shore, the Bible tells us, the Israelites sing of God's might, of his capacity for violence.
The Lord is a man of war. Lord is his name. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. Thou sentest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stubble. Exodus 15:3.
It could be said, however, that this violence is justified.
It seems that the notion of God coming along and helping a people who are oppressed to overthrow the oppressors and march out in victory to come to live eventually freely in their own land, this is really the first time, and maybe in fact the only time, that we hear of such a concept. It's really a great concept, the notion of the God as supporting the quest for freedom and liberation.
As the Bible tells it, God has a special purpose for the Israelites. At Mount Sinai, Moses would receive the laws that bind the people to the covenant. In addition to communicating the Bible to Moses, God speaks the Ten Commandments directly to the people. Here, for the very first time in history, are concepts about violence, about how people ought to treat each other.
The Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. There God spoke these words unto him. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not kill. Exodus 19:20.
The Bible represents a turning point. More than a collection of great stories, this singular work contains a set of moral values that are virtually unprecedented. Never before have humans had such a set of ethical and democratic standards. And yet, even one of the most vivid commandments, the prohibition against taking another life, is open to some interpretation.
The Hebrew is not really "thou shalt not kill" of the Ten Commandments. The commandment in the Ten Commandments is "thou shalt not murder." Because clearly the Bible does not expect that Israel and human beings in general will never kill. In self-defense, killing is permitted. In certain wars, killing is permitted. And even the Bible sanctions capital punishment for some offenses.
But scholars still debate the precise meaning of the words found in the Sixth Commandment.
It has often been said that the intention of that commandment is really to say, you shall not murder. But that's not really what it says. It says, you won't kill. But once again, we have to live with this paradox that the Bible seems to present to us in the image of God. We are not supposed to kill. When we do, we're often judged for it. God, on the other hand, is God, and God has the power of life and death.
But beyond the Ten Commandments, the Bible is full of other laws. One of these, above all others, echoes loudly and clearly, even to this day.
You are to take life for life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. Exodus 21:23.
Is the Bible telling us to be stern and merciless?
The principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth shouldn't be taken as an invitation. It should be taken as a limitation. And that is, despite the social status of anyone, despite the fact that you might have a very wealthy person and a very poor person, and the wealthy person might be able to, through some legal systems, exact a greater punishment than any weak person would, according to the Bible, for all people at all times, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, the punishment fits the crime irrespective of your social status. So it is a very egalitarian law in that sense.
God's work as a divine warrior is not done. The Israelites are still in the wilderness, not yet in the promised land. There is much more sacred violence yet to come. After many years of wandering, Israel finally arrives at the verdant land that God has promised them. But this land is not empty. It has its own people, the Canaanites. The Bible tells us that these Canaanites practiced erotic fertility rites in honor of the gods Baal and Asherah. Worshippers would abandon themselves to cult prostitutes. They would even sacrifice children to win their god's help in a crisis.
Do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God will send the hornet among them until even the survivors among them have perished. No one will be able to stand up against you. You will destroy them. Deuteronomy 8:17.
Having liberated the Israelites from Egypt, God will now fight a new holy war of liberation. A war that will turn particularly violent and savage. A war to liberate the promised land from the heathen Canaanites. Why was so much relentless bloodletting necessary? Jericho. Today the battlements are but scattered stones. It is here that the Israelites launch their conquest of the Promised Land. It is also here that the first in a series of bloodbaths took place on God's instruction and under God's command.
Now, there is an attempt to justify that on the sense of the evil of the Canaanite peoples and how part of this land taking was a punishment for their evil as well. But predominantly, the text seems to reflect this idea that it was the taking of a land, someone else's land, that God promised to the Hebrews.
From evidence discovered by archaeologists at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, the Israelites would seem to be no match for the Canaanites and their weapons of war. The Canaanites' spears and arrows were crafted of metal. They are deadly. They are strong. How could the Israelites, with weapons made only of stone, even stand a chance? The answer, the Bible tells us, is that God is on their side. After causing Jericho's thick walls to collapse, God orders the Israelites to commit one of the most violent and troubling acts in the entire Scripture. It is a practice of ancient holy war known as the ban.
God has given you the city. The city shall be under solemn ban. Everything in it belongs to God. Under the ban, they destroyed everything in the city. They put everyone to the sword, men and women, young and old, and also cattle, sheep, and asses. They then set fire to the city and everything in it, except that they deposited the silver and gold and the vessels of copper and iron in the treasury of God's house. Joshua 6:17.
The ban. Every precious material thing is left behind in the destroyed city, a part of God's treasury. Every living thing, every man, woman, child, and animal is put to death, sanctified to God as well.
I think the ban is only comprehensible for modern readers if we keep in mind that for these ancient people, warfare was a religious act, and therefore the killing of every living thing was an act of sacrifice as a part of the religious action that the whole war was. It was all a religious action.
I mean, if you're asking me, do I believe in a God who said, kill men, women, and children? My answer is no. But I understand that it's in the ancient world, in fact, I'm not sure that you can conquer a land without destroying its inhabitants. Because if you do, inevitably, especially with a culture that is so different from the culture of the inhabitants themselves, they will sooner or later seek to undermine and destroy that which you've built.
Do not defile yourselves by any of these things, for by all these the nations I am casting out before you defiled themselves, and the land became defiled, so that I punished its iniquity, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. Leviticus 18:24.
Is this the way war was fought in ancient Israel? We don't know. But do we find ourselves like the Israelites, justifying war by saying that these people deserve to be killed because of the way they are?
Warrior God is just one of many attributes which the Bible gives to God. That same warrior God is a God of love and mercy. The same warrior God is a God who makes promises of being able to have a fruitful family and continuity of the line of the people of Israel. The same God that gives a Bible that commands, thou shalt not murder. The same God who seeks to elevate man spiritually.
Violent as it may have been, the conquest of the Promised Land ushers in an era of prosperity and peace as the Israelites go about the business of settling their new home. As their material well-being increases, their closeness to things spiritual seems to diminish. Rather than continuing to rely on God to run their daily lives, the Israelites now want a leader they can see and hear and touch.
And so they demanded for God to give them a king. And the response of God was to say, this is an act of faithlessness. You're going to regret this decision.
In this decision, the seeds of its violent destruction are planted. As Israel moves toward the height of its power during the next 100 years, so too does it move further and further away from God. It is now a nation led by kings and not God. Pagan idols make a reappearance. Far to the north, Assyria, the cruel giant, is awakening. This goes largely unnoticed by most Israelites, except for a few prophets who wander the country's bazaars and streets, warning of God's impending punishment.
Ah, Assyria, the rod of my anger, the staff of my fury. Against a godless nation I send him, and against the people of my wrath I command him. Jeremiah 10:5.
But will the people return to the ideals of monotheism? Will they listen in time to avert disaster? With the exception of the golden calf, God's wrath has not yet been turned on the chosen people. But once again, the Israelites have turned to pagan gods, and once again, retribution from on high will not be long coming. In 701 BCE, Assyria attacks the Israelite city of Lachish, the most powerful citadel in the kingdom, fortified by massive walls and enormous gates. In the very center lay the palace.
With arrows sharp, bows strung, their chariot wheels are like the whirlwind. They growl like lions which roar as they seize their prey. Isaiah 5:28.
Today, the site lies 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem. But Lachish is a battle one need not struggle to imagine. There is a record of this siege, which is unique in all biblical archaeology. At the Assyrian royal palace in Nineveh, King Sennacherib built a massive hall to commemorate the encounter. Alongside the winged bulls, standing 18 feet high, are sculptured slabs depicting the attack. The Assyrian lancers rush the Israelite walls, gripping their shields. From above, the defenders shoot back with bow and arrow, slingshot, or simply throw rocks. Today, uncovered slingshot stones bear silent witness, as if still waiting to be thrown. The most terrifying weapon of the age was the Assyrian siege machine. Like an armored tank, it hammered relentlessly at the weakest spot in the walls.
It's very difficult to imagine for us living today how near the two sides were to one another. The defenders stood on the wall, while the people in the siege machines tried to destroy this wall. Sometimes probably the distance between them was something like 15, 20, 25 feet.
The Assyrians are victorious. They erect stakes on which to impale the bodies of dead defenders.
There is a great mystery in the Bible as to why God permitted the Assyrians and Babylonians to destroy Israel. And the two answers that are given are, one, that God has allowed us to be destroyed because we've sinned, that we didn't cherish the gift that God gave us the way God intended. That is a powerful answer, and also, of course, a dangerous one, because it implies that when something terrible happens to us, it's always our own fault or responsibility. The other answer that's given, though, is that it's a mystery.
In 1932, a macabre discovery was unearthed by archaeologists at Lachish. Near the site, they unearthed burial caves filled with bones and skulls. 1,500 bodies in all. Many were women and children.
No one really stops and asks the question, maybe God could not protect his people. Maybe what happened was outside of the power of God. That is never asked because of the assumption that God is all-powerful.
According to the Assyrian annals, over 200,000 people, young and old, male and female, were deported from ancient Israel. This was the beginning of the diaspora, the scattering of the Jews the world over. While the Babylonians would later complete what the Assyrians had begun, this exile would be the final great crisis of the people of the Bible. How could they be the people of the Bible without a land, without a king, without a temple?
The irony is this: they were defeated by precisely the kind of military power that they demanded for themselves. And as a result of that, there's a profound sense of judgment that the Bible has on the whole experiment of being a mighty nation with a king and its own military means and power.
Out of this pain came the words of Isaiah, perhaps to reach a new understanding of God and God's will. Perhaps a yearning for peace and simpler times. Perhaps a way to grasp the meaning of so much violence.
The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the goat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Isaiah 11:6.
Obviously, to me, from the very first, God's ideal is an ideal of peace. And when Isaiah makes his famous prophecy about beating swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, he is enunciating the ideal of the way God wants the world to be. And it is true that human beings may have to go through a great deal of suffering and privation to get there, but that's where they're headed.
Maybe what it means to be the people of God is not to have a military power at all. Maybe what it means to be the people of God is to somehow be a presence for peace and for righteousness amongst the powers of the world as they exist, and not to be a power of our own. Maybe there's a sense in which our God ultimately is a God of peace and not war.
God of peace. Something that a young teacher in the Galilee named Jesus would speak of several hundred years later. Was the message of peace preached by Jesus a natural outgrowth of the violent times of the Old Testament? And if so, why does the New Testament depict Jesus leading his armies into battle, his robes drenched in blood? Will the people finally live in peace, or continue to fight wars in the name of God?
And Jesus said unto his disciples, Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. Matthew 5:8.
To every generation of Christians since Jesus, it is his message of peace and love that lies at the very heart of the New Testament, a message spoken at the Sermon on the Mount.
If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. Love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:39.
And yet, after speaking so eloquently of nonviolence and love, the New Testament closes not with peace, but with war. It is a cataclysmic battle against the forces of evil. And at the head of the armies of good, upon a white steed, is Jesus.
Its rider's name was Faithful and True, for he is just in judgment and just in war. His eyes flamed like fire, and on his head were many crowns. Written upon him was a name known to none but himself, and he was robed in a garment drenched in blood. He was called the Word of God, and the armies of heaven followed him on white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Revelation 19:11.
The book of Revelation is a cosmic wish fulfillment. It says that the enemies are going to be wiped out. As a matter of fact, they're going to be utterly wiped out. And all of those people who are doing evil things to the Christians, primarily the Romans, they and their forces are going to be destroyed, and the Christians are going to be rewarded.
In this final battle, the sky darkens, and out of the smoke comes the beast, Satan. He takes on many forms, each more horrific than the next. Along with Satan come the four horsemen of the apocalypse: death, plague, sword, and famine, and all who wear the mark of the beast.
Certainly the book of Revelation has been read by some as a justification for warfare, especially if the enemy can be seen to be demonic in any way, to be a force of the Antichrist.
So the New Testament is not devoid of the very same notion that God could become involved in warlike activity, and that he would support his people in warlike activity, and that the wicked would have to be destroyed, and that evildoers would be punished by God. These notions are actually common. They're part of the common theology of, essentially, we could say, Hebrew Bible and Judaism on the one hand, Christianity on the other.
Jesus and his forces are victorious. The beast is destroyed. He is thrown alive, the Bible tells us, into a fiery lake of burning sulfur.
For people who literalize that stuff, it's really negative because it's fatalistic, leads to stuff like Jonestown and starting nuclear wars. For people who can use the imagination and see it like science fiction, let's say, it could be cathartic.
After the terrible battle is over, the New Testament ends with a final glorious vision of the kingdom of God.
And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Now the dwelling of God is with men. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." Revelation 21:1.
It is a vision of the kingdom of God, not unlike the Old Testament. But most early Christians interpreted the book of Revelation as a spiritual war, and for 300 years the church strove to renounce violence. They tried to live the words of Jesus. Despite persecution, they remained pacifist and did not allow soldiers to join their flock. But then, in 313 CE, came the Roman general Constantine. At the age of 21, he was already a renowned and feared warrior. But legend has it that as Constantine fought to become emperor of all Rome, he had a vision of a burning cross, under which he was promised victory if he fought for the sign of Christ. He converted at once, and in 313 CE, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Within a few short years, the religion of Jesus Christ, the religion of worldwide brotherhood, peace, and love, the religion of the Sermon on the Mount had been instituted as the official religion of the mightiest war machine on earth, the Holy Roman Legions.
The need to call on people to make horrendous sacrifice in their lives has always throughout history required the services of religion. I'm very suspicious of, and in fact I'm horrified by the way in which the Bible has been manipulated to serve those purposes.
It was Augustine, the great religious thinker, who first developed the doctrine of the just war, war in the name of God. Citing both the Old Testament and the New Testament, he proposed that war was acceptable to God under certain circumstances.
Very often the scriptures, both Old and New Testament, speak of two sides of God, and to us they seem mutually exclusive. And somehow the message is that in God, these seeming contradictions are together, are held in tension, are held together. I don't understand that.
Today, outside the United Nations, 177 flags are hoisted each morning to fly together. The words of the prophet Isaiah are chiseled into the base of a monument that stands in the shadow of the General Assembly building.
They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war evermore. Isaiah 2:4.
And to me, the totality of the biblical message is that this world is a wilderness, that in this wilderness human beings pass through it with great difficulty and with many conflicts. But in the end, the goal is clear, which is a world in which our evil impulses are subdued, our impulses to good and altruism triumph, and they triumph not only because we care about each other, but because we have a relationship to God.
If the Bible calls us to a relationship with God, the enduring mystery remains. How can one turn the other cheek when the world sometimes demands an eye for an eye? How can one live in peace when the world often calls for a struggle against evil?
For everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to sow and a time to reap. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. Ecclesiastes 3:1.